You need to move. Now. This isn't your seat. Brittany Collins pointed at the black man in seat 1A, her white Armani suit pristine against the cabin lights. David J. Roberto looked up from his newspaper, jaw tightening momentarily before settling into calm. I'm in the right seat. 1A, paid and confirmed. I don't care what you think you paid for. Brittany's voice rose sharply. This is first class. Look at yourself. Polo shirt, khakis. You don't belong here. Move. Now. Passengers turned to watch. A businessman in 2B muttered, Why do they always try this? Just move to economy. A woman shook her head at David. Some people have no shame. The cabin filled with judgmental stares and whispers. David Roberto, CEO of the airline they were flying, sat perfectly still in his modest clothes. Surrounded by people who couldn't imagine the most powerful person on the plane was the one they were trying to remove. David had boarded early, among the first passengers on Skybridge Airlines Flight 447. He quietly placed his worn leather briefcase in the overhead compartment and settled into seat 1A with the practiced ease of someone who had flown thousands of times. No one noticed him. No one needed to. Sandra, the lead flight attendant with her blonde hair pulled into a perfect bun, glanced at him with puzzled eyes. 20 years in aviation had taught her to read customers instantly. And this black man in casual clothes definitely didn't fit her mental profile of a first-class passenger. She offered no greeting, no beverage service, no professional smile reserved for premium guests. Just a fleeting look of confusion before turning away. When white passengers in expensive suits began boarding, Sandra transformed. Good morning, Mr. Harrison. Your usual champagne? Her smile beamed, body language warm and welcoming. Mrs. Bennett, let me help with your bag. The contrast was unmistakable. David observed everything through peripheral vision, his fingers drumming a quiet rhythm on the armrest. Brittany Collins swept in like a storm, her Chanel No. 5 perfume announcing her arrival before she appeared. She stopped abruptly at seat 1A, eyes narrowing as she saw David. The calculations in her mind were almost visible. Black man, casual clothes, premium seat. This equation didn't compute in her worldview. Excuse me? Brittany's voice dripped with false sweetness. There seems to be a mistake. This is my seat. She waved her phone displaying her boarding pass like a victory flag, though it clearly showed 1B. David looked up, meeting her cold stare with calm eyes. No mistake. I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. His voice was steady, unhurried. Brittany spun toward Sandra, who was watching from the galley. Miss, could you please check this? Obviously she emphasized the word with unmistakable disdain, is in the wrong seat. Perhaps he can't read seat numbers properly. You know how it is sometimes. Sandra approached, and for the first time in the 20 minutes David had been seated, she addressed him. Sir, may I see your boarding pass? Her tone was ice-cold, professionally distant, no please like she used with white passengers. David showed his phone screen, clearly displaying Seat 1A, First Class, confirmed. Sandra studied it with skepticism that wouldn't dissolve. Let me verify this with our system, she said, as if electronic boarding passes could be counterfeited. Is verification necessary for all first-class passengers? David asked mildly. Or just certain ones? Sandra's face flushed slightly. It's standard procedure when there's a dispute. There's no dispute, David replied. This lady wants my seat. That's not a dispute, it's an assumption. Brittany huffed indignantly. Look, I fly first class every week, platinum member, brand director at PepsiCo. I know who belongs here and who doesn't. She gestured at David's polo shirt. This isn't a coffee shop where you can just claim any table you want. David remained seated, pulling out his phone to type a brief message. Michael, Flight 447 situation developing as expected. Document everything. The recipient was Michael Chen, Executive Vice President of Skybridge Airlines. Brittany hadn't waited for Sandra's verification. She'd already started live streaming on Instagram, her phone camera pointed directly at David. Guys, you won't believe what's happening right now. Her voice thick with theatrical indignation. I'm in first class, and there's someone here who clearly doesn't belong. Look at this situation. David sat perfectly still, observing how the camera treated him like an exotic specimen on display. He didn't shield his face or react. His sharp eyes simply tracked every development while his fingers typed another message on his phone. Flight 447, situation escalating, stand by for my signal. The recipient was Michael Chen, Executive Vice President of Skybridge Airlines. Sandra called over Josh, a young flight attendant with neatly styled brown hair. We need to verify this gentleman's booking, she told Josh, speaking loudly enough for surrounding passengers to hear. The word gentleman carried an undertone of mockery barely concealed beneath professionalism. Josh approached with an iPad clutched in his hands. Sir, we need to verify your booking again. This is highly unusual. His voice carried unnecessary coldness, a tone he'd never used with any white passenger in his 3 years of service. What exactly is unusual? David asked, his voice remaining remarkably steady. A black man in first class? Josh shifted uncomfortably but quickly regained his rigid composure. That's not what I meant. We just need to ensure everything is legitimate. Brittany jumped in, her camera still rolling. Oh, please. We all know what's happening here. Probably some upgrade error, or maybe, she lowered her voice conspiratorially, fake tickets. It happens all the time now. People trying to sneak into places they don't belong. The live stream viewer count climbed rapidly past 20,000. Comments flooded in, most supporting Brittany. Get him out! Security! Why do they always try this? David could glimpse some comments from his peripheral vision, his expression unchanging. I have a contact at TSA, Brittany announced loudly, pulling out a second phone. Let me call them to verify this suspicious person. We can't be too careful these days, especially with certain people. She let the sentence hang, but the implication was crystal clear. Sandra and Josh exchanged glances. They both knew this was exceeding standard protocol. But neither wanted to be seen defending the black man in the polo shirt. The pressure from Brittany, from the watching white passengers, felt too intense. David opened his laptop and began typing. Sandra leaned over, trying to see his screen. Sir, what are you doing? Documenting, David replied simply. Every word, every action, every face. He turned the laptop so Sandra could see clearly. A document headed, Systemic Discrimination Incident, 447, Real-Time Documentation. Sandra stepped back as if the laptop might bite her. Sir, that's a serious accusation. No, David corrected. It's observation. Would you prefer I stop documenting how Skybridge Airlines employees handle this situation? The cabin grew quieter, more passengers now paying attention. Some had pulled out their phones to record. The atmosphere thickened with tension and anticipation. This is ridiculous, Brittany said to her growing audience, now at 30,000 viewers. He's trying to intimidate the crew just because they're doing their job. This is what happens when people don't understand boundaries, don't respect authority. David closed his laptop momentarily and looked directly at Sandra and Josh. Have either of you actually checked your system yet? Or have you been too busy performing security theater? Josh fumbled with his iPad, finally actually checking the manifest. His face went slightly pale, but he quickly composed himself. The system shows, there might be, I need to check with the captain. Listen. Brittany's voice cut through the cabin like a blade, sharp and merciless. I don't care what your ticket says. People like you always try to sneak into spaces you don't belong. This is first class, not some budget section where you probably should be. The entire first-class cabin seemed to freeze. Several passengers pulled out phones to record. David counted at least 5 cameras pointed at him, not including Brittany's live stream, which had climbed to 50,000 viewers. He remained seated, back straight, meeting Brittany's vicious stare with unsettling calm. Sandra added fuel to the fire. Sir, perhaps you should consider moving to avoid further complications. We don't want this to escalate. She emphasized escalate like a veiled threat. Sometimes people make booking mistakes. It happens, no shame in admitting it. A white passenger from row 2A stood up, a large man in an expensive gray suit. Just move, man. You're holding everyone up. Some of us have important business to attend to. This is embarrassing for everyone, especially you. David slowly closed his laptop and set it aside. He stood up, and both Sandra and Josh instinctively stepped backward as if afraid he might become violent. But David simply stood there, hands clasped calmly in front of him, the posture of someone long practiced in controlling his emotions during moments of injustice. Embarrassing? David repeated the man's word, his deep voice clear and measured. Is it embarrassing that I purchased a first-class ticket with my own money? Or is it embarrassing that you all automatically assumed a black man couldn't belong here? Brittany laughed mockingly. Oh, please, spare us the race card. This isn't about that, it's about belonging. Look at you. She waved her hand dismissively from his head to his feet. Polo shirt? Khakis? No watch, no proper shoes. First-class passengers don't dress like whatever this is. You're probably some employee trying to use a buddy pass inappropriately. Josh stepped closer, his iPad trembling slightly in his grip. Sir, I'm showing some irregularities in the system. Maybe there was a glitch when you checked in? These things happen with... He paused, but everyone knew what he meant to say. We need to call security, Brittany declared, her phone still recording. This man is refusing to comply with crew instructions. That's a federal offense, isn't it? She turned to Sandra. Are you going to let him disrupt this entire flight? Sandra nodded slowly. Sir, if you don't voluntarily move, we'll have to call airport security. This is your last chance to handle this with dignity. David pulled out his phone and opened a voice recording app. Before you do that, he said, the recorder clearly visible, I want it documented that I've shown my valid ticket 3 times, that I've been accused of theft, fraud, and trespassing based solely on my appearance, that not one person has actually checked the system properly. He turned to face Brittany's camera directly. And I want those 100,000 people watching to know that Skybridge Airlines has a zero-tolerance policy on discrimination. Interesting how that policy is being implemented right now, isn't it? Are you threatening us? Josh asked, his voice cracking slightly. David smiled, the first smile since the drama began. No, I'm documenting. There's a difference. But I'm curious, do any of you know who actually wrote Skybridge's anti-discrimination policy? Sandra and Josh looked at each other in confusion. Brittany waved her hand dismissively. Who cares who wrote it? You're still trespassing. David sat back down in seat 1A, reopening his laptop. I care, because I spent 3 months writing every word of it. But please continue. Show me and your viewers exactly how my own employees handle discrimination. The cabin fell silent. Sandra's face went white. Josh's iPad nearly slipped from his hands. But Brittany, too caught up in her righteous fury and the adrenaline of her viral moment, didn't process the implication. Your employees? Your employees? She laughed cruelly. Now he's completely delusional. Everyone. This man actually thinks he owns the airline. Several passengers shook their heads in disgust. Someone muttered, just call security already. Another added, some people really can't accept their place. David typed steadily on his laptop, documenting every word, every face, every moment of humiliation. His fingers moved calmly across the keyboard, but those watching closely might have noticed the tight set of his jaw, the controlled breathing of someone holding back a lifetime of similar moments. Sir, Sandra said, trying to regain authority, your delusions are concerning. If you're having some sort of episode... The only episode happening here, David interrupted quietly, is a masterclass in systematic discrimination, and you're all the instructors. Brittany slammed her handbag onto the floor with theatrical force. Your own employees? Sir, you're delusional now. She spun toward her camera, eyes gleaming with triumph. "Everyone, we have a situation here. This man now claims he owns the airline. Can you believe this?" Her live stream exploded. Viewers jumped from 100,000 to 150,000 in seconds. Comments scrolled frantically. "Call security now!" Another crazy one. "Why do they always lie when caught?" David could see every comment from his angle, his jaw clenched tight, though his expression remained controlled. "I'm a platinum member and a PepsiCo executive," Brittany declared, waving her membership card like a weapon. "I've flown first class hundreds of times. I know a fraud when I see one. This man is trespassing, lying, and now making delusional claims. This is actually concerning." "Maybe he's unstable?" Sandra seized the opportunity immediately. "Sir, if you're having some sort of episode, we need to handle this differently, for everyone's safety." She grabbed her radio. "Josh, call for backup. We might have a 5150 situation." David's eyes flashed dangerously, though his face remained still. They were attempting to frame him as mentally ill. Classic playbook. He typed rapidly on his phone. "Michael, escalate to board immediately. They're attempting psychiatric hold narrative." Josh was already speaking into his radio. "Yes, we have a non-compliant passenger in 1A. Claims ownership of Airline. Possible mental health crisis." His voice was loud enough for the entire first-class section to hear. A middle-aged woman in 3B stood up. "This is ridiculous! Just remove him so we can take off." She turned to David. "Sir, whatever your issues are, handle them elsewhere. Some of us have real business to attend to." "Real business," David repeated, a hint of irony creeping into his tone. "Tell me, what business would that be?" "I'm meeting with airline executives in Chicago," the woman boasted, "about a $1 million catering contract. So yes, real business." David almost had to suppress a laugh. He knew exactly which meeting she meant. He was supposed to chair that meeting. Heavy footsteps echoed from the jet bridge. Captain Marcus Rodriguez appeared, his uniform crisp and perfect, face stern with authority. 20 years flying for Skybridge, and Marcus had never encountered a situation quite like this. He didn't recognize his CEO in casual clothes, surrounded by an angry mob. "What's the situation here?" Marcus asked, scanning the chaotic cabin. Brittany immediately pounced. "Captain, thank God, this man," she pointed at David like identifying a criminal, "is refusing to leave my seat. He's made delusional claims about owning the airline. He's disrupting the entire flight. We're already delayed 20 minutes because of him." Marcus looked at David, and something in the black man's eyes made him pause momentarily. There was a vague familiarity he couldn't quite place. "Sir, I need you to comply with crew instructions. If there's a seating dispute, we can handle it at the gate, but—" "Captain Rodriguez," David interrupted calmly. "Badge number 7749, 20 years of service, exemplary record, 2 commendations for passenger safety. Wife Maria, 2 daughters in college." Marcus's face went pale. "How do I know all that? Lucky guess?" What?" Marcus stammered. "Captain," Sandra interjected quickly, "he's clearly studied employees online, probably some sort of stalker. We need security." Brittany's live stream had reached 200,000 viewers. Hashtags were trending. Crazy passenger, flying while black, Karen in the air. But David noticed other hashtags gaining traction. Chuck, wait, what if is right. Skybridge CEO, this feels off. Passengers in first class began taking sides. "Throw him out," someone yelled. "He's holding us hostage," another added. But a young black woman in 4A spoke up. "Has anyone actually checked if he's telling the truth? Why are we assuming he's lying?" "Because look at him," Brittany responded viciously. "Does he look like someone who owns an airline? Be realistic." The tension ratcheted higher. Flight attendants from economy class had come forward to watch. Passengers stood in the aisles, phones out, recording from every angle. The scene had transformed from a dispute into a spectacle. The main cabin door opened again. Two airport security officers entered, hands resting on their utility belts. The atmosphere went from tense to explosive. This was no longer just a disturbance. It had become an event. "Sir, we need you to come with us," the lead officer said, a burly white man with sergeant stripes. "You're being removed from this aircraft." David didn't move. "Officer, what's your probable cause?" "Disrupting a flight, refusing crew instructions, possible fraud," the officer rattled off mechanically. "Now, we can do this the easy way or the hard way." "The hard way being?" David asked, genuinely curious. "Forcible removal, arrest, federal charges," the officer stated. "Your choice." Brittany was practically glowing with triumph. "See what happens when you don't know your place, when you try to take things that aren't yours?" She turned to her camera. "Ladies and gentlemen, justice is being served. This is what accountability looks like." David's phone buzzed. A text from Michael. "Board is watching. Holy shit, David. Want us to intervene?" David typed back, "Not yet. Let them finish hanging themselves." Marcus, meanwhile, had been frantically checking his iPad. His face transformed from confused to concerned to absolutely terrified. "Oh my God," he whispered. "Oh my God, no." "What?" Sandra demanded. Marcus's hands shook as he held the iPad. I just pulled up the company directory, the executive photos." He turned the screen toward Sandra. There on the display was David J. Roberto, Chief Executive Officer of Skybridge Airlines, in his official corporate photograph. Sandra's face drained completely white. No, that's not possible." "What's not possible?" Brittany demanded, still streaming. David stood up slowly, phone in hand. "I think it's time." He pressed a button. Suddenly, his face appeared on every seatback screen throughout the aircraft, his corporate CEO portrait replacing the safety video. "Ladies and gentlemen," David's recorded voice played through the cabin speakers. "I'm David J. Roberto, Chief Executive Officer of Skybridge Airlines." The cabin plunged into absolute silence. Even the engine noise seemed to fade. Brittany's phone shook in her suddenly trembling hand, the live stream still capturing every second of her dawning horror. The cabin fell into absolute silence. Even the hum of the engine seemed to fade as every eye fixed on the seatback screens displaying David's executive portrait. The same man they'd been humiliating for 30 minutes stared back at them in a $5,000 suit, standing before the Skybridge corporate logo. David lifted his phone and swiped to FaceTime. The call connected immediately. On the screen, 12 faces appeared. The entire board of directors of Skybridge Airlines, assembled in the emergency session he'd requested via text 20 minutes ago. "David," Chairman William Chen's voice boomed through the speaker. "We're all here. We've been monitoring the situation." "My God, David, are you all right?" David held the phone up, angling it so the board could see the security officers, the terrified crew, and Brittany's face draining of all color. "Ladies and gentlemen of the board, I'm currently experiencing firsthand how our employees handle suspected discrimination. It's been educational." "Is that Captain Rodriguez?" Board member Janet Thompson asked. "Captain, can you hear me? This is Janet Thompson, Chief Operations Officer. You're speaking to your CEO. Do you understand?" Marcus's legs nearly gave out. "Yes, ma'am. I understand. Oh, God. Mr. Roberto, I didn't recognize the casual clothes. I'm so sorry." David turned to Brittany, whose phone was shaking in her hand. Live stream still running, but her mouth opening and closing soundlessly, like a fish gasping for air. "Ms. Collins, you're still streaming? Good. Your 200,000 viewers should see this." He held up his phone higher. "Board, meet Brittany Collins, PepsiCo brand director, who has spent the last half hour documenting her discrimination for the world to see." William Chen's voice turned ice cold. "Ms. Collins, I hope PepsiCo has good lawyers. David, do you want legal on the line?" Already ahead of you, another voice chimed in. This is Michelle Harris, General Counsel. I've been recording everything from our end. Miss Collins, you should know that Skybridge Airlines has a partnership agreement with PepsiCo worth $50 million annually. Had, past tense. Brittany's phone clattered to the floor. No, I didn't. You don't understand. He didn't look like... Like what? David asked quietly, his voice carrying throughout the deadly silent cabin. Like a CEO? Like someone who could own an airline? Because of my skin color? My clothes? Please, finish your sentence. Your viewers are waiting. Sandra had collapsed into an empty seat, face buried in her hands. Josh stood frozen, iPad hanging limply at his side. The security officers had already begun backing toward the door. Officers, David called out. Leaving so soon? You were about to arrest me, weren't you, for the federal crime of sitting in my own seat on my own airline? The sergeant cleared his throat. Sir, we were responding to a crew call about a disruptive passenger. We had no way of knowing that I was telling the truth. David pulled out his corporate American Express black card and his executive ID. These were in my pocket the entire time. No one asked. Everyone just assumed. The phone in David's hand lit up with another call. He answered on speaker. David, this is Robert Morrison, CEO of PepsiCo. I just saw the live stream. I am appalled and horrified. Ms. Collins, if you can hear me, you're terminated effective immediately. Clear out your desk. You'll be hearing from our legal department. Brittany's knees buckled. She grabbed onto a seat for support. Mr. Morrison, please, I didn't know. How could I know? He was dressed. You mean he was black? Morrison's voice cut through sharply. I watched the stream, Brittany. We all did. You've exposed our company to massive liability and damaged a critical partnership. You're done. David turned to Sandra and Josh. As for you two, 20 years, Sandra? 20 years of treating passengers differently based on their appearance? Sandra sobbed. And Josh, 3 years since we hired you fresh from college. We trained you better than this. Mr. Roberto. Marcus stepped forward, removing his captain's hat. I take full responsibility. As pilot in command, I should have maintained control, verified facts, ensured fair treatment. I failed. I'll submit my resignation immediately. David studied him for a moment. You'll submit to retraining, Captain, demotion to first officer for 6 months, but not termination. You at least showed doubt. These two, he gestured to Sandra and Josh, showed none. He addressed the cabin where dozens of phones were still recording. Everyone here is a witness. You saw how quickly assumption became accusation, how bias became action, how prejudice nearly led to an innocent man's arrest. On his own airline. The board was still on FaceTime. William Chen spoke again. David, what do you need from us? Full investigation team on the ground in Chicago when we land. Every second of this needs to be documented. David looked directly at Brittany's phone on the floor, still streaming. And make sure our friends at the media know that Skybridge Airlines just became the first carrier to implement mandatory monthly bias testing for all customer-facing employees, hidden executives, mystery shoppers from diverse backgrounds, zero tolerance. The protocol you wrote, Janet Thompson said. We're activating it company-wide? Every word, David confirmed. He picked up Brittany's phone, saw the viewer count had hit 500,000. To everyone watching, you've just witnessed what happens every day in this country. The difference today? The person you dismissed had the power to fight back. Imagine those who don't. Within 2 hours of landing in Chicago, the video had exploded across every platform. 3 million views and climbing. Our Skybridge CEO trending worldwide. CNN, MSNBC, Fox News, all breaking the story. Breaking. Airline CEO experiences discrimination on own plane, exposes systemic bias live. Sandra and Josh were escorted from the aircraft by security, company badges confiscated immediately. Their termination letters were waiting at the gate, along with legal notices about potential civil suits. Sandra's 20-year career evaporated in an instant. Josh's aviation dreams crushed before they'd truly begun. Brittany Collins sat in a corner of the terminal. Phone buzzing non-stop. PepsiCo's PR team calling, lawyers calling, reporters calling. Her Instagram had gained 100,000 followers in an hour. But they weren't fans. Death threats, shame campaigns. Her face becoming a meme for corporate racism. "Congratulations, you played yourself," plastered over her shocked expression from the moment David revealed his identity. Within 24 hours, the dominoes began falling faster. PepsiCo's stock dropped 3% as boycott threats emerged. They issued a statement distancing themselves from Brittany, announcing mandatory diversity training for all executives. Brittany's LinkedIn disappeared. Her Twitter went private. Sources inside PepsiCo confirmed she'd been blacklisted from the industry. But David wasn't finished. At an emergency press conference, he announced the Flight 447 initiative, comprehensive reform across American aviation. "What happened to me happens to countless others daily. The difference? I had power to expose it." The FAA, under intense public pressure, launched an industry-wide investigation. Within a week, United Airlines CEO called David personally. "We're adopting your protocols. Can't afford not to." Delta followed. American Airlines, Southwest. In 72 hours, an entire industry was scrambling to implement anti-discrimination measures they'd ignored for decades. Congress acted with unusual speed. The Flight 447 Reform Act was introduced, requiring all U.S. carriers to maintain independent diversity boards, publish quarterly discrimination reports, and submit to random federal testing. David testified before the Transportation Committee, the video of his testimony going viral as well. "Senator, you asked why this legislation matters," David said calmly to a skeptical lawmaker. "Because a black CEO can't even sit in first class without being accused of crimes. Imagine what happens to regular passengers." Marcus Rodriguez, demoted but retained, became an unexpected ally. He volunteered to lead the new training programs, using his shame as a teaching tool. "I failed my CEO because I couldn't see past his clothes and skin. How many others have I failed?" The real power shift came when institutional investors took notice. BlackRock, Vanguard, State Street, controlling trillions in assets, announced they'd prioritize airlines with verified anti-discrimination practices. Money talked louder than morality ever could. Brittany, meanwhile, had become unemployable. A month later, reporters found her working at a small marketing firm in rural Pennsylvania under her maiden name. The firm fired her within days when her identity was discovered. She'd lost her Manhattan apartment, her social circle. Her entire life collapsed from 30 minutes of prejudice broadcast to the world. Skybridge's Roberto protocols became the gold standard. 47 airlines globally adopted them within 90 days. The European Union began drafting similar legislation. David had turned personal humiliation into systemic reformation. At a Fortune 500 conference, David revealed the program's early results. "In 60 days of secret testing, we've terminated 83 employees for discrimination. That's 83 people who were treating passengers differently based on appearance, every day. For years." The audience sat in uncomfortable silence, many wondering about their own companies. 6 months later, David stood before an audience of 3,000 at the National Aviation Summit. Behind him, a simple slide showed two numbers, 1 and 500,000. He let the silence stretch before speaking. "One person. That's all I was on Flight 447. Just one black man trying to fly from Los Angeles to Chicago. 500 million. That's how many people have now seen what happened. But this isn't about viral videos or public shamings. It's about the fundamental question, who belongs?" He clicked to the next slide. Photos of passengers, all different races, ages, backgrounds. Every day, someone decides who belongs in first class, who belongs in boardrooms, who belongs in positions of power. They make these decisions in seconds, based on clothing, skin color, accent, and every day they're wrong. I could have stayed silent, shown my ID immediately, avoided the confrontation. My board advised me to let it go, handle it privately. But silence is compliance. Comfort is complicity. His voice carried the weight of decades of experience. When you have power and witness injustice, using that power isn't just an option, it's an obligation. The audience listened intently as David revealed the deeper impact. Since Flight 447, we've received 12,000 reports of discrimination across various industries. 12,000 people who felt empowered to speak up because they saw that even CEOs face this. That's the real victory, not the terminations or lawsuits, but the voices no longer willing to be silenced. He shared a message from a young black engineer. She wrote, "I saw what happened to you. Last week, when security stopped me entering my own office building for the 5th time, I finally reported it. I'm done being quiet. That's worth more than any stock price increase." The Roberto protocols aren't just about catching discrimination, David explained. They're about changing the very culture that enables it. When employees know anyone could be a mystery shopper, any passenger could be an executive, they must treat everyone with dignity. Forced fairness becomes habit. Habit becomes character. David's voice softened. People ask if I forgive Sandra, Josh, Brittany. Forgiveness isn't the point. Accountability is. They were products of a system that rewarded their biases until those biases met consequences. Now that system is changing, not from goodwill, but from necessity. A colleague asked me why I didn't just fly private, avoid commercial flights altogether, because, David paused, privilege shouldn't be a bubble. Leadership means experiencing what your customers experience, especially your most vulnerable customers. He concluded with a story. My grandmother cleaned airplanes in the 1960s. She wasn't allowed to use the same bathrooms as white workers. She'd be amazed I own an airline now. But she'd be heartbroken that 60 years later I still had to prove I belonged in my own seat. We've integrated the spaces, but not the mentality. That's what Flight 447 exposed, the gap between policy and practice, between law and behavior. Change isn't just about rules or protocols. It's about recognizing that dignity isn't determined by appearance, that worth isn't measured by wardrobe, that belonging isn't about looking the part, but being human. Now I speak directly to you. David looked straight into the camera, knowing this moment would be clipped and shared millions of times. Every one of you has power, not CEO power, not corporate power, but something stronger, the power to witness and speak. When you see discrimination, your silence is acceptance. Your voice is a weapon against injustice. You don't need a title to demand dignity. You don't need wealth to deserve respect. But you do need courage to say 3 words. This isn't right. Whether you're watching someone dismissed in a boardroom or disrespected in a boarding line, those 3 words can change everything. He pulled out his phone, showing it to the audience. This device made Brittany Collins powerful for 30 minutes. She used it to broadcast bias, but it also made her accountable forever. The same tool that spreads prejudice can expose it. Every one of you carries this power in your pocket. Use it. Share this story not for entertainment, but for education. Comment, Skybridge Equality, if you believe in zero tolerance for discrimination. But more importantly, act. Tomorrow, when you witness bias, and you will, don't look away. Document it, challenge it, report it. Some say I ruined lives that day. Sandra lost her career, Brittany became unemployable, but they ruined lives every day, quietly, systematically. The only difference was this time, there were consequences. This time, power protected the powerless instead of the powerful. David's final words rang through the convention center. Flight 447 proved that sometimes the most powerful person in the room is the one you'd least expect, the one you dismiss, the one you underestimate. Remember that next time you judge someone by their appearance. They might just own the plane. The sky belongs to everyone, not just those who look the part, but those who dare to soar. Don't wait for permission to belong. Don't apologize for taking your rightful seat. And never, ever let anyone tell you where you don't belong. He stepped back from the podium. Choose humanity over hierarchy. Choose justice over comfort. Choose equality over easy assumptions. The revolution isn't coming, it's here. It's live streaming. And it starts with your choice. Today. Right now. Are you ready to fly?